Welcome to another episode of Speak Out World. I'm your host, JL.
And I'm your host, Dino L. And we'd like to thank all of our listeners to our Speak Out podcast. And we're so excited to have a part two to what we just completed. I'll let Jewel L take over from here.
Well, Dino L, we just, for those who tuned in last week, had a wonderful guest, Reggie Beaty, who discussed his part of his life, thug life to triumphant life, right? And so Reggie, welcome back to Speak Out World Podcast.
Yeah, big Greg, we needed you back, baby.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so very much.
I just want to give the guests, if there's anyone new that is tuned in, just a brief recap of the conversation that we had in part one. You were telling us about your life growing up in Bankhead, which is a community in Georgia, growing up in that neighborhood, and how after having such a stable life as a young person and your mom having the breakdown, how you all moved to Bankhead community, and just some of the things that you encountered being in that community as a young male dealing with poverty, and just how you were able to overcome a lot of those struggles and growing up not knowing your father. And so when we ended the part one of that conversation, talking about your book, again, Thug Life to Triumphant Life, you were telling us about a person that was instrumental in your life in turning things around. So if we could, let's pick up from there, the person that, like, where the fork in the road came for you, and then how you got on the road to become this colonel in the Army for 20 years, this trainer, this educator.
And some of the positive things that you experienced in Bankhead as well, Reggie. We want to know, because we know that there's not only the negative side, but there's a positive side as well. Can you speak out on that?
Well, thank you for having me back, first of all. Let me say, I think the number one thing that sticks out to me, and I wonder, how did those strong women raise so many kids? And I'm very intentional. I say those women, because again, I mentioned there were no fathers there, but those mothers, just their grit, their resiliency. I mean, just teaching us how to go about being able to survive, not in all the negative ways, because imagine this, and most of us can't deal with one or two traumatic experiences. But I want to say this real quick and just take a few minutes to acknowledge those wonderful women, mothers. We grew up in a community below adequate housing, fatherless families, daily drug use, teenage mothers and fathers, crime and fights deaths, mothers and children with limited to low employable skills, low reading skills, no college graduates, very few positive role models. All these other things, some kids attended school, some not, but yet those mothers never gave up on us. And to me, if someone abandons you, then you're left by yourself. But those mothers taught us family. They taught us staying together in spite of not having resources. And they were able to deal with all that trauma. And some people can't deal with one. So before people that judge, I would ask you to take another look and see and ask yourself, how could I survive that? And so if I can mention one thing, I can't say enough about my brothers, obviously, for doing the best they could, but they were teenagers trying to help a younger brother. But those mothers, the grit and the resiliency for not giving up. And to me, there's nothing greater than the love of a mother that I experienced and the other young people in my community, in spite of having to deal with all those other things. So that just stands out to me.
Reggie, I have a question here. After being exposed to positiveness and being on the road to a new educational experience, what were some of your college experiences and how did they propel you to your destiny today?
Wow, thanks, Dean. I remember, I never forget, it was August of 1976. my mother and my mentor, Bobby Garrett, my family put me on a Greyhound bus where most kids get in a car and they go out. They put me on a Greyhound bus, and I think I may have had $100, maybe a little more in my pocket with a suitcase.
Wait a minute, Reggie. What happened to all the money, man?
Man, you know, when you're living that kind of life, Dean, when you give it, you have to make some choices. And
I got you.
I made was the kind of, it changed me.
Yes, sir.
Now, that was tough. But I knew inside of me that somewhere, maybe subconsciously, I knew I wanted something different. Yes. That's why I say sometimes good people do bad things. And so they put me on the bus, first time leaving the state of Georgia. I got on the Greyhound bus, what seemed like 20-hour bus ride in a car that would be 2.5 hours. And I arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at Stillman College with a GED in tow, the only school that will accept me at that time, and they took a chance on me.
Wow.
So when I got to Stillman, it was different. The environment was different. First of all, everybody was coming up to you, speaking, being friendly. Everybody had a common goal. And I was afraid. I was scared because all of a sudden, I'm out here as a fish in the ocean. I'm not used to this. I wasn't in this type of environment where everybody's friendly, everybody's studying, everybody going to the library. And so I had to put on my street skills and my street sense, and I had to be like the Romans. You do as the Romans do when you're in Rome. And so I started watching their behavior, and they became my peer mentors. I watched what they were doing. Young ladies no longer were having babies on a regular basis, and young boys were about doing things and studying. I wasn't used to that, even though I had the cognitive ability. And then I started watching their behavior. And at Stillman College, although I didn't have money, I started after the first 2 days, I started to get on another Greyhound bus and use that $100 to go back home. Because I wasn't used to this. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't good enough because of this behavior, and I had never seen this before, and so it was new and it was brand new to me. So essentially, Stillman, I started meeting all these friends, and I started changing my leadership skills that I had, and meeting all these folks from New York and Chicago and Miami and all these other places that had a common goal. We're talking 1976, and man, riots were still going on, and we still had visual racism and all these other things going around. But Stillman did something. It was a small community, single gender dormitories, and all the behavior that I used to have was no longer there, and kids were going to the library, and I just blended in, and it changed me. And then all of a sudden, from the leadership in a gang, with all that foolishness I was doing as a leader of a gang that we called ourselves the Four Little Boys, to change and going over here around college students and watching their behavior. And then after the first year of school watching, I ended up joining a fraternity. I ended up having good grades. I ended up being the president of the dormitory. I ultimately became president of my chapter of the United Negro College Fund, vice president of the business club, on the Merit Advisory Club, Mr. Sophomore. I mean, you would think that I majored in extracurricular activities. The reality is I had so much fun that I stopped going home just except to go visit my mother, because now I started putting myself and integrating into this new environment, and it just became awesome. And then ultimately I got a scholarship from the United States military that paid for all of my education, ultimately for undergrad and graduate school. ROTC was there, and I became the first Black cadet ROTC commander at both schools, because I went to a HBCU, but our ROTC program was the University of Alabama and Stillman. I became the first commander of the cadet commander of the ROTC program of both schools. And I just changed that leadership into something positive. And I can't say enough about the students who I surrounded myself with, that I was able to transcend the type of leadership I had in gang-like activities, robbing, burglarizing, incarcerated. But here's the most important thing. None of my friends in college, it wasn't important. Well, it was important. My roommates and none of my friends in college knew about my past behavior, because I didn't want to tell them because I would wonder, would they judge me? Would they accept me?
Yes.
They think instead of inviting me to their homes that I'd be constantly trying to steal, rob, burglarize, but I left that life behind.
Mhm.
So those were the things that I would say that stood out to me, that I had a chance to just blend in and become a traditional college student. And I start acting and feeling like a college student. And after I graduated from college, at graduation, I was commissioned as a lieutenant, and I cried. I didn't cry because I was happy I was graduating. My mom and my brothers and sister came to my college graduation. I didn't cry because I was happy. I actually cried because I was sad I was graduating from college.
Wow.
For the best years, and that foundation that Stillman and those professors gave me for believing in me, I can't say it. It was an extension of Bobby Garrett and my mother at my college, in spite of the fact that I was broke again.
But you were rich. You know, you were rich in the experience. You were rich in what you were learning, and you were rich in pivoting your life in a new direction. And so, what someone else may consider that you were poor, but you really wasn't, Reggie.
Joe, you're right. I think about it. I had an opportunity from leaving Atlanta, leaving my high school, which was an alternative school, because you have to think of it. There's no hope without opportunity.
That's right.
They gave me an opportunity when they accepted me with a GED. They allowed me with 1 year of high school with limited transcript to be able to come. And how can you have hope if you don't get an opportunity? And so many kids around the country don't have hope because there are no opportunities. You can't just automatically find it up in the sky and pull it out. And that's why I say you need both opportunity to do well, and people do better when they know better, but you also need to have better. And without those two things, I don't see how you're going to navigate through this maze called life, especially as a youth, as a child, without support.
Hey, Reggie, I want to jump in if I can right now. What was it like, Reggie, to become a colonel matriculating all the way through the U.S. Army, to become a colonel and managing millions of dollars, as well as hundreds of soldiers in several buildings, knowing that you are a product from the streets of Bankhead? Speak out on that.
Well, leadership. I guess in some ways I had some, and then even what was early on misconstrued by me and applying it the wrong way. But I got ranked really, really quick. I enjoyed the military. I spent 7 years in Germany. I loved from initially commanding 30 soldiers to 100, and then ultimately to 1,000 plus soldiers as a lieutenant colonel. And then all of a sudden, I commanded a battalion, which only less than 1% of the lieutenant colonels in the military get selected for that position. In addition to being selected my first time to go to one of the prestigious college, schools called Commanding General Staff College. But then getting selected for all these special opportunities, I was selected as one of the primary planners for the 50th anniversary of World War II attended by kings and queens and the President of the United States. But I was the primary planner for that. And
wow.
Man. Plan that. And those things, the mentors who saw something in me and giving me the lead unit. And then I was selected as the best. Then I left there, and while I was still in the military, first President George Bush came to Middle Tennessee State University. I was a professor where I also went to graduate school there. And I was selected as the best instructor in the nation for all colleges and universities.
Wow.
ROTC.
Amazing.
So, all those things, Civic Man of the Year in the state of Oklahoma. So that military experience gave me a foundation. But then something hit me, Dean. In 1998, I got the most dreadful call. I was on my way. I knew I was going to be a general officer, watching the Colin Powells of the world and et cetera. And I knew in my mind that I was on that track to be a general. But I got that dreaded call that my mother had passed. I was living in Oklahoma. And I left my family in Atlanta, and I got that call. And I still had some anger in me. And I remember to this day, I put a hole in a wall when I got that call from my niece saying my mother had passed.
Wow.
And sometimes an event can change you. So
Yes.
I went from having the desire of being a general to knowing that I've lost so much connection with where I came from and my family and other things. And so it just changed my trajectory. A great military career, wouldn't take anything from it. It taught me so much around strategic planning and leadership and action planning to it just promoted me moving on to my next phase of my life. And sometimes you have to find the good in everything that happens. It was hard for me to find the good in the death of my mother at a young age of 59. And I tell people I helped kill my mother. I don't mean literally, but because of my bad behavior previously, I had to put some stress in her life. And so the military prepared me. I can't say enough about that trajectory, part of that triumphant life. But I made a choice to retire from the military as opposed to staying in, compared to what my superiors, they wanted me to stay in. But I knew there was something else out there for me in that next life, the next phase of my life.
Yes.
Wow. And can you, if you feel comfortable with that, Reggie, can you talk a little bit how the death of your mom really just impacted you? Like, did you feel a lot of guilt, or even though you had still turned your life around?
Yeah.
Can you just share with us a little bit about that?
I'd say it's 3 phases of life, and that's the plight, how you got somewhere, the fight, in my case, how do you get out of it, and then the right. Mm-hmm. And the right part of my life, I said, how can I honor this lady, this woman, this beautiful being who gave so much of herself? And so her death, before that, I'd already made a decision. I had license in real estate and insurance and investment license. I wanted to get out and make a whole lot of money and et cetera. But I never used one of those certifications because when my mother passed, I said, man, she lived a short 59 years. And here I was doing things. I was able to go back and give her all kinds of material stuff. But the change happened, frankly, Jewel, when I realized that there were so many kids who were living the life that I lived and may not have had the Bobby Garretts or may not have had that environment that needed to get out of that place. And so I said, I need to honor her. And so I initially started a scholarship in her name just to give money. And then I realized that, no, that's not enough. There's something to be said about some of the skills and talent in a non-traditional way, that she was such an awesome woman. And I always asked, why did she not give up on me and my brothers and sisters? It was her love, that unconditional love. And as a result, I dedicated the rest of my life, and I'll never forget it, in 1998 when she passed, 2 years later, I retired. I dedicated the rest of my life to honoring her and mothers and families like the one that I had and the people I grew up in. And that foundation has led me not only to who I am today, but what I do and what I believed in, because they made such sacrifices, and why not me? And so that's what it really did. And thanks for the question. My mother and what she stood for, and those other mothers, by fighting for what's right. And it just led me to what I'm currently doing in my life now.
Well, let's talk about that, Reggie. Can you discuss your life after retiring from the U.S. Army and how this has led you into work with the Georgia State Department of Education and all of the other programs that have helped form what you do today?
So if you look back and you think about it, you look at it, I think data informs, stories inspire. And what I mean by that, data informs, stories inspire.
Inspire, okay.
As you look at things that are going on in the country around the coronavirus and other things, that data informs us. And then you see what the medical folks are doing and the first responders, that's inspiring. But the data tells us a story. So my focus and dedication is on education. And when I look at the fact that any given day, you can look at the enrollment at our juvenile justice system around the country, and there are over 60,000 young people incarcerated, like the Reggies of the world. If you look at it, there are 3.4 million kids that have found themselves in out-of-school suspension. 3.5 million kids in school suspension in a year. You look at 200,000 young girls find themselves teen mothers. So, Dean, when you ask that question, how does it inform, how does it take me now from working with school system now? That's the data that informs. But it also has to have us inspired when we see that there's a way that you can come out of this, but it's not an event, it's a process. And so that leadership has allowed me to now come back into my state. I was the chief operating officer of the largest dropout prevention organization in the state of Georgia for about 4 years. And then the governor of Georgia asked our organization to lead the team that started two statewide initiatives, the graduation coaches. And so I led the team that put and trained a graduation coach in every middle and high school in the state.
Yes.
And then something was in my gut saying there are so many kids like the Reggies of the world that didn't have an opportunity to go to non-traditional schools. So Communities in Schools, my former organization, got money from several foundations and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they gave us about $25 million. And so I led a team that put together these non-traditional schools that ultimately has graduated over 30,000 plus kids who otherwise would not have graduated. And I led the team to put that. When I say led, I had a whole lot of good, make sure you understand, when I say I'm not talking about me. I'm saying I may have been the leader, but leadership is also when you put good people around you and you're not intimidated. And I want people who are a lot smarter than I am in my circle. So all those things, putting together youth camps at Georgia Tech and Emory, those things that led me to, and then at one point I made a decision that I wanted to do more because they promoted me to executive vice president, chief operating officer. And then I became the bean counter and administrative and evaluations and all of that. That really wasn't my heart. My heart was in the streets and going into schools and doing the work. And so I resigned. And for the last 10 years, I had one stop. I became vice president of a historically Black college and university in Augusta. And then I realized I still wanted to do more. And so I formed my own organization with the current work that I'm doing right now.
Wow, Reggie, that is a lot. Like that is a lot in the different avenues and ways that you have taken your experience and want to be able to touch and grab and teach and reach other young people so that they will not fall into the traps that may be set before them because of where they live or because of their economic status. I'm really curious about the response you received from two sets of people. One, from your colleagues, once you put the book out, and you talked about, your childhood, Thug Life to Triumphant Life. And then a part two of this question, the response you get from other young men who first look at you as like, he doesn't know. He ain't been where I've been. I got to make this money, all of those things. And then when they hear your testimony, I mean, what's the response? So those two different worlds really that you're touching in, how has the response been?
Let me answer the first part about the young men and the teenagers that I deal with. I love that. They were so receptive, not about the book, because even when I was in the military and doing all those things, I always had a nick for just wanting to just be around young people and talk. And I would connect with young people and I could understand their plight and some of the things. Because sometimes when we're in education and other places, we look in the mirror and because we're wearing our nice clothes and all these other things, and we tend to say that and look at people and we unintentionally sometimes we judge. But when you're looking at it through the lens of a young person, you have to ask yourself as an educator, not from where I came, from whence I came, where did that young person come in? And if you start doing that, you can build a better relationship because it's not about you. And sometimes we want to dictate and tell without listening and not without being an active listener. And the only way you can engage that young person to build a relationship, you got to hear their story. Well, in my case, not only did I listen to their story, I experienced their story. And unfortunately, in some ways, it gave me some credibility in their eyes, what they call now street cred.
Street cred.
I don't particularly care a lot about street cred because it was up to me. No one would go through the journey that I went through and that some of our young people are going through. So that's the first group. It was very easy. The second group, when you're talking about adults that already have their opinions formed and et cetera, I had that in my own mind. The reality was, when so many people who knew me and who knew about my work and was encouraging me to write, so many of them were amazed at my journey. And I can't tell you how many people have told me what the book has done for them. They didn't know that about my life. They couldn't believe it and what it has done to inspire them. Young people, some parents giving it to their children. It's just been overwhelming, the amount of people who've contacted me, from educators to ministers. Yes. My roommate called me, my former roommate in college, he called me and said, man, I did not realize. And so I would tell you, Jewel, it's just been overwhelming how receptive people have been and the comments I've received. And oh, by the way, I was about to go on the road with both that and to churches. And then all of a sudden we got hit with the coronavirus in terms of voting. But that's okay. You know, I'm okay. I'm in a good place. I'm in such a good place. And that too will happen again. I can't worry. Serenity allows me to accept those things I can't change. And so, but the most important part is I have the courage now that I know I'm going to go forward and I'm going to do more work. And so, long answer short, extremely receptive. The problem wasn't everybody else. The problem was me. Wow. I didn't want to release so much of myself, talking about things that are so personal. But yet I said, I need to honor my mother. And what would she want me to do? And so it just allowed me to tell that story. And maybe I can help another child that finds themselves stuck in a game, almost at a point of no return.
Brother Reggie, I'd like to just follow up on that in a sense that I'm aware of your foundations for educational success. And as a former administrator principal, I had you come into the school and do work with my teachers on team building. And it was so emphatic that I could see the difference in the way that not only you affected the teachers, but that the teachers affected the students. And I'd like for you to speak out on your work with Foundations for Educational Success and how it impacts students, teachers, and parents.
Thank you, Dean. I mentioned around the foundation, and thank you for the question. And I think that's, I talk about the three phases of my life: the plight, how did I get stuck in that game? And then the fight, all the God's moral compass angels that helped me get out of it. And then the last part is the right. And that is, what are we going to do about changing the trajectory of so many other folks? And so that led my business partner, Tony Owens, and I, about 17 years ago, we created this organization called the Foundation for Educational Success. It was initially the Beaty Foundation, honoring my mother, but it really didn't tell the work. And so I changed the name to the Foundation for Educational Success. And we take a three-pronged approach. Most of the times when we think about education, we think about school. The first thing comes in mind is teaching and learning. And the first thing you think about is what happens with teaching and learning? Well, curriculum, instruction. Well, I can tell you that in a lot of schools that have not thought this way, some schools need to think differently, in my opinion. And because we're putting the cart before the horse, what I mean by that, you can throw curriculum all day. But if your school is suffering and the culture and climate is broken and it's hurting, and teachers are not able to teach, and leaders are not able to deal with curriculum and watching over teachers what they're supposed to be doing, and you bring about behavior from teachers, principals, parents, and teachers, then you're not going to cause the right learning environment. And Dean, that's what you were doing in your school, and we just added to that. And so we took a three-pronged approach. The first one is a student focus. How do we get young people turned on to living so they can get turned on to learning?
Wow.
Don't tell me about learning if I'm not living, if I can't see adjustment, motivation. Don't tell me to come in with that moral compass around what I'm supposed to do right or wrong. We're talking about young minds. And so as a result, our first focus was who am I, meaning a child, you got to ask these questions. Who am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there? But more importantly, if I look in the mirror every day and I see myself being the old Reggie, the way I grew up, the way I was, then there's no end of that road that you can say you want to be successful. But if you keep along that trajectory, it's not going to happen. But it has to be critical thinking skills from the young person, not because of us saying do it because I said, because that's not sustainable. But if you're able to address the non-cognitive, the social emotion to get young people to understand why they're in school. So the first thing you have to do before you can get to curriculum instructions, you got to deal with these social behaviors. You got to be able to, you may not be able to change what's going on the outside and the family environment, but when you come in my building, I can start nurturing you, the whole child. So schools that do that, that's number one that we focus on. And we have a curriculum called Faces of Change that's actually going online until next school year. It's been in book form for years, which you're aware of, Dean. And then the second part is the parent focus. I think we have to surround kids and beat them up. I don't mean physically beat them up, but when that parent and that teacher and that principal, that administrator come together and circle around that child on the same way and not let that child get outside that box. And I'm not talking about just because you didn't graduate from high school or college or what have you, but when parents and teachers get together and administrators get together, and we say we're not going to let the Reggies of the world, the previous Reggies of the world fail, that's the second part. And we have to give parents those resources. It is not a they. And when you can have parents, so the second part of that is we created a tool that's actually coming out for parents. It already was out in book form, but it's going to come online here in the next month or so, where parents will be able to access it, that curriculum. There are a lot of districts that were already interested, that already have it, that are using it. And we thought how best, especially right now, for us to bring that. And then the third thing is the school focus. If schools and leaders do not create a high-performing cultural environment, it starts from the principal and the administrators first. And Dean, you are aware of that, and you created that. There are school systems that we work with, whether it was formerly in DeKalb, but now Clayton, other school systems where leaders understand that. And they're putting resources in that in Alabama, in Kansas, in Missouri, in DC, in North Carolina, other places where we work at. They realize culture and climate is the foundation of creating a high-performing environment. And you're able to deal with that. And then you focus on the whole child and then leadership training. And that's what has withstood us now as we go into schools. And then the final part of that is going into churches where we have something we call edutainment based around my life, but it's dealing with entertaining, but educating inside churches. So you're talking about this message in something of not just, it's more skit, it's acting, it's song. And how do we get more people to realize the foundation of mentors and others? Parents can't do it by themselves. My mother never would have been able to do it by herself. And so if we look at that from a three-pronged approach, then I strongly believe it's not an event that's going to cause so much trauma to get out of the way, poverty to get out of the way. We have to change generation, and it's going to take a process and not an event. And so that's the work, what I call the right, what Tony and I call the right, and that's the space I live in, I breathe it, I live in it every day. And Dean, you
love it, Reggie. You love it.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned all those things, because that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you was, what advice would you give to a single mom that's trying to save her son or her sons from traveling down the road of ending up dying too young or being in jail or just making the wrong decisions? What advice would you give to her?
You know, when you're talking about parenting, I think it's the most difficult occupation in the world. And anybody doesn't believe that, I'm a father. My greatest joy in the world is being a dad. I have 2 adult daughters and 5 grandchildren. And that's my greatest joy. But that wouldn't have happened without my mother and other strong mothers and grandmother, Big Mama, giving us that foundation. And seeing other men as I got older and what they were doing. And so when I think about mothers, and what the battle they're fighting every day, because I'm not a mother, I would just say you're going to have to get some help. You can do all that and fight that fight all day, but you're doing the best you can do. Because mothers, I mean, if there was a better way, they would come up with it. But they're doing their very best. But I would say it's going to take organizations like my former organization, Communities in Schools. I mean, organizations that are mentoring and doing all these other things in schools. I cannot tell a mother that anybody that says this is the silver nugget that's going to cause change, I say look out for that person. They're selling you some oil that you shouldn't buy. You're going to need a community approach, because think about all the things I talked about, Jewel, around poverty and trauma. Kids are coming to school with book bags full of baggage, bags full of trauma, not book bags full of books. In order to take those things out, it's going to take a community approach, and it's going to take churches and community organizations to help schools do this, because schools can't do it by themselves. They get all the blame. And so parents, I would say, listen and look for all these parent tools. When I know you're home crying like my mother did, it's okay, let it out, and then get up like those mothers did and like you mothers are doing every day. And you're going to have to, and for those who are wealthy, and I don't mean just financial rich and wealthy, I'm talking about with skills, we're going to have to get out of our box and say, I made it, and so can you. No, you had some help. Somebody helped you do it. And so I would just say those mothers, we have a community perspective, and that is, it's going to take more. So I would say read the information, go on our website, go online, contact us. We'll send you some tools, but it's not just us. It's a whole heap of folks, if I could use that word, a whole heap of folks that has resources out here to help parents to deal with some of the things and some of the trauma they're having to deal with.
Reggie, this has been, again, such a wonderful, wonderful podcast having you on as a guest on our show.
Absolutely.
I don't want you to leave without sharing any type of advice or anything that we didn't cover with our podcast audience that you would like to make sure that you share.
Thank you. As I close out, I would just say that, first of all, I'm honored and I'm humble, but more importantly, I know that my trajectory is not one that I want for most young people. And it doesn't have to be. And I think for this to be the richest country in the world, to look down upon, and anytime you look down upon those who the have-not, some people like to call us, and at that time, I was also tell young people, your poverty does not have to determine. Poverty with itself is bad enough. But with grit and resilience, your intellectual ability can take you out of it. And all we need to do is have those surrounding us with support. And so poverty, as negative as it may be, on family and children, sometimes good people do bad things, but we have to stop making excuses, young people as well. Take some responsibility. Because if other people are investing in you, you must invest in yourself, because we can only take you to that well. We can't make you drink out of it for the rest of your life. You have to want to drink out of it. Teachers and parents and everyone else showing you that major love. And I would say, parents, sometimes hard love is okay. No is okay. Do your work, go to bed. No, you can't go. No, you can't do. That's okay, because we need that. And guys, the specific lifestyles, and there's so much goodness out here. And I just like to say, where do we go from here? As Dr. King said in 1968 when he wrote his last book. Where do we go from here? As Frankie Beverly says in his song, we are one. And so I just close out with that. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? We are one. And I just thank you all so very much for having me. And I'm blessed in so many ways. But again, my greatest joy is being a father.
All right.
I love being a father.
Reggie, the last thing I like to say is I've learned from you today is that your poverty doesn't determine your destiny.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. So Reggie, again, give us the information where people can get your book, get in contact with you.
And for FFES, for Foundations for Educational Success. How can educators get in touch with you?
Thank you. Our email address, our website is FFES.com, which stands for the Foundation for Educational Success. I can be reached directly through our office at area code 678-557-7306. Again, that's 678-557-7306, or email, that's Reggie, REGGIE at THEFFES.com, or Tony, and then the rest of it is the same. Tony is my business partner, Tony at THEFFES.com.
Thank you so much, Reggie.
Yes, Reg.
You guys are
Thank
awesome.
you.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much. Dino L., this has been another wonderful podcast episode that I have enjoyed sharing with you. And Dino L., as we always tell our guests, remember, you have a voice, so don't be afraid to speak out, world.
Speak out, world.
That's right.
Yeah.